Mortar shells and rifle shots came towards us. We all hit the ground. One by one, we dove. When Rose got up, he was in the middle of the road. So I lifted my camera to take his getting up and diving in the gutter. He became a target maybe 2, 3, 4 seconds more than the other guys. He was hit.
If you are making a picture like this extraordinary picture that Tony Vaccaro made, you are very close. You are where bullets and artillery and grenades and all of those devices designed for injury and war are flying. Vaccaro is not in a place of safety, but he turns around and he sees this man running. So he puts the two together in this terrific picture. Heartbreaking, but terrific picture. And he can only hope that this man survives. It turns out he doesn't.
If you look at the landing in Normandy and you see the film and you see the soldier coming across, all they do is just fall. Suddenly life comes to an end and gravity takes you. I don't understand whoever started this idea of doing this, looking upward. Even Hollywood movies, when gangsters kill each other, they go, it doesn't happen that way. I always saw soldiers just falling. It's almost like regrettably giving up life. It's almost, there's no desire to stand up anymore. That you get that feeling, and you just go down. We all go down to earth again. All of us. While I was in high school, I really wanted to become a foreign correspondent photographer. Then I said, well, I need money to buy a camera. So I went to become a caddy at the Palm Country Club. I saved every penny. When I made $60, I went to the camera shop and I said, I would like to have a camera with which I can sneak up on people, take their pictures, and they will not be aware of me. Can you imagine? He said, I have the right camera for you, an Argus C3. It was $47.50. I said, could you please fill it up for me? Fill it up, it's the word I used. I didn't know it was loaded.
From that $47 investment, Tony Vaccaro would go on to become a world-renowned photographer for magazines such as Flair, Look, and Life. Though Tony trained his lens on some of the most celebrated figures of the 20th century, it is in fact his collection of World War II photos, taken as an infantryman in battle, that is his enduring legacy.
It's a little decent.
In more than 8,000 images, he captured the day-to-day reality of life as a soldier and created one of the most comprehensive photographic records of World War II. But it wasn't until the late 90s that this extraordinary body of work became known to the world. Tony had kept it locked away for decades in an effort to put the war behind him.
My uncle influenced me in photography. I was an orphan. My mother died when I was 3.5, my father when I was 5. I learned survival very early because I went to live with Uncle Onofrio in Italy, who was very abusive. I was black and blue for 16 years, but he was one of the greatest hunters, and it was through him that I learned how to shoot. He would see a fox and he went like this, bang! And the animal would fall. That's how I take pictures. A little longer, there's no picture anymore. People change their expression. Even if they're crying, they stop and smile. The real photographer must take that picture. Half a second later, the picture is gone.
Voi siete fratelli? Gemelli? Siediti.
Una foto.
Attenzione.
When I graduated from high school, I was the best long-distance runner in Westchester. And I wanted to compete in the 3,000 meter at the next Olympics. And that was taken away from me. I graduated 2 months before I was drafted in the Army. Amazing. They were very quick.
In September 1943, Tony was drafted as an infantryman. Soon after he arrived at basic training, he sought out the office of the Signal Corps, the section of the Army that oversees photography in the military. Tony told a captain he was a photographer and requested to be transferred.
I took with me the pictures that I had taken in high school. So this captain took one look at me, looked at the pictures, says, "The pictures are great, but you are too young for us." So I said, "Sir, I am old enough to do this and not old enough to do this." That's exactly what I did. And he said, "That's cute, but you are still too young for us." Got me so mad. I said, "I am going to show you that I can do better than all the Signal Corps photographers put together." And when I found out that the issue combat camera was the speed graphic, I knew I had them. You know what it is to carry exposures for 36 pictures? It's like 20 pounds. I had a 35 millimeter, my Argus C3.
But it was a cheap consumer model with a plastic lens. It wasn't a Leica, but it was tough enough to survive the rigors of war. More importantly, it's the ability to run with the camera, to move it, to react very quickly. Because it's a rangefinder, he held it up to his eyes, and he could photograph what he was actually seeing. So Tony was able to put this around his neck and use it whenever he needed to, and use it in a way which was not that obvious.
Robert Capa told a great story that he was in England very early in the war. There was a bombing flight, and he didn't go, and they came back with shot-up planes and wounded and dead. And they were taking the bodies off the plane, and they blocked him. And they said, "You can't photograph unless you've been in the parade." And For Kappa, that was the signal that if he wanted to have these men trust him and if he wanted to photograph, he had to be with them, and that's why Kappa was D-Day 1. What's so revealing about Tony Vaccaro's photographs is no one would say that to him because he was in the parade. He was one of them. They trusted him, not only with the pictures that he took to them, but he could trust as the man on one side or the other of them when fighting broke out.
I arrived at a scene on a medevac helicopter. We landed. A suicide bomber had blown up a small forward outpost that a group of Americans had been staying in. 6 Americans were killed, some of them still buried under the rubble of this brick building that they had been in. I raised my camera, I took maybe 5 or 6 photographs, and one of the soldiers ran at me, wound up to punch me. He shoved me over a wall, and I was literally dragged back to the helicopter. Now, this wouldn't have happened if I had been with them, if they knew who I was, if they knew why I was there. Tony would have complete trust. I mean, that band of brothers mentality that you'd have.
Kappa famously said, your pictures aren't good enough unless you're close enough. Well, no one got closer than an infantryman to the war, and no one was closer than Tony, therefore. Even the great war photographers of World War II, none of them got as close as him on a daily basis. None. No one. Not a million miles as close as him. And they're extraordinary for that reason.
There are military photographers who are under direction about what they are to shoot and what they are not to shoot, and they have no control over their material, and in fact, their names are most often lost. When someone uses the term war photography, 90% of the time they're thinking about photojournalists, because photojournalists are the ones who've gotten their work out. They're the ones that have the monographs. They are the ones that have some glamour to them.
I was the London picture editor for Life magazine. We occasionally ran pictures that reflected the totality of war. In general, let's face it, we weren't neutral observers. Life was propagandizing for Allied victory, as was the entire press corps in London. War correspondents were the most privileged of all people in wartime because we were technically civilians. In London, we lived like kings. I mean, we had expense accounts. We lived it up.
They are living in the mud, in the rain. They're getting shot at, just like soldiers do as well. The difference, of course, is that after a certain period of time, whether it's a few days, a few weeks, or a couple of months, the photojournalist can leave and go home or stay in a 5-star hotel while the soldier remains.
On the 18th of June, 1944, Tony arrived in Normandy. Like all World War II combat infantrymen, he was equipped with a backpack, a shovel for digging foxholes, an M1 Garand rifle that held a clip of 8 rounds, and a pair of combat boots. Hidden from view was his small camera.
When we entered the boat from England, we were told no pictures, that if anyone was caught taking photographs, the camera would be destroyed. I checked to see if my lens could take a picture right through the buttonhole of my raincoat. And as it was raining, I noticed that it just wouldn't do it. So I made the hole larger. And I clicked one picture. I call it my first view of La Belle France.
It was only after Tony overheard an officer that he learned where he was. Omaha Beach, site of the highest casualty rate of the D-Day landings. What awaited Tony once he got to shore was brutal evidence of the toll paid to secure the beachhead 12 days earlier.
All the bodies that were on the beach, they were all taken and put along the road to be put on trucks. There were thousands and thousands of bodies. Head to feet, head to feet, head to feet, all the way. The smell, I never smelled that smell. It was like meat rotting. There is a war smell that is ugly. And I smelled that the minute I arrived in Normandy.
Tony would fight with the 83rd Infantry Division for the next 324 days, traveling from France through Luxembourg and Belgium, and finally into Germany until the end of the war.
I think one of the problems of trying to talk about the Second World War in Northern Europe and the experience for an ordinary GI is that none of us can really relate to it. Any movie you've seen, anything that you think will help you understand the experience doesn't come anywhere close to what it was actually like to be there. The average infantry division in northwestern Europe in World War II, most of them are going through 100% turnover. That means every guy that comes into Europe from the US is either shot, wounded, or taken off the line. Certainly if you landed in Normandy in June of 1944 and made it to the end of the war on the front line, you were incredibly lucky. You were very, very lucky indeed. God was looking after you.
At the outskirts of Saint-Denis, we faced the Germans. It was the first big battle.
Puis moi, à 7 ans, je me rappelle quand même le carnage. Mais le pire à notre tour, hein, moi en tant que gosse, en tant qu'enfant, c'était de vivre dans l'odeur de la puanteur au mois d'août. Parce qu'il n'y avait plus de feuilles, il n'y avait plus de branches, il n'y avait plus d'oiseaux, il n'y avait plus de vie. Et il n'y avait donc plus de chlorophylle dans les feuilles pour dégager l'odeur. Hein, c'était fou. Hein. Je crois que le souvenir et la mémoire dureront longtemps.
All of a sudden, someone said, the Germans, the Germans. And I see them, and I take the rifle, and I could not click. I couldn't shoot. I threw the rifle away. I came back through here. I crossed the town, and there I sat in a foxhole, and I said to myself, Tony, you're a coward. Now, can you live as a coward for the rest of your life?
One of the big problems we had in Europe with people like Tony was that they weren't mean enough. They weren't killers. Unbelievably, less than 1 in 4 Americans in a firefight, when people that are shooting you actually return fire, which is extraordinary. We solved that to some extent in Korea. By Vietnam, it was almost 90%, and then in recent conflicts, we've made sure that we kill people most of the time when we have an opportunity to. But for the average working class American in a foxhole in Europe, they didn't want to kill people.
I figured that I could never live with myself as a coward. So I came back, I picked up the rifle where I threw it, I aimed at the Germans, and I started shooting. And I never stopped till the war was over. When I was in Normandy, I had no developing tank, I had nothing, because I thought that on Sunday during the war, I could always go off and go to a camera shop and have the films developed there. Can you imagine that? Except in Normandy, there was no camera shop. There were no towns. Everything was destroyed, you see. One day, I passed by the ruins of this town, and I see that that building was a photo shop before the war. So I go through the ruins, and I see the chemicals. I put the chemicals together. I mixed like a gallon, what I thought was a gallon. No temperature. I warmed it up with stern of the water, and I mixed my chemicals. And the first night, I developed 10 rolls in 4 army helmets going up and down with the film. And I hung the film on the branches of trees. And what I used was pins that I happened to have, and they stay there all night, you see. Next morning, early light, I looked, and it was perfect.
Tony didn't have the time to treat his negatives archivally. The imperfections, if you will, in the photographs, I think contribute actually to their strength, to their realness, and to their immediacy.
Lucky I never had a bullet with my name on it. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened to all the pictures I had taken, because I was carrying all the negatives in my backpack. When I saw Saint Michel for the first time on July 31, 1944, I thought how magnificent this is. And I looked at the camera, and I saw that I only had 8 exposures left. And I said, Tony, you're not here as a tourist. Save the pictures for the war. There was no war here. Fortunately, Saint Michel was just liberated that day. So here I am here today, taking pictures of it. And that's it. One is enough. The Saint Saint Michel is at the very top with his wings, looking at us. Just for peace forever.
The most amazing thing about the Americans in World War II in Europe, people like Tony, was that every day they had to get up and advance. We had to go from Normandy almost to Berlin, and that's a long way. If you spend that long in combat around civilians and around your buddies, there's going to be times when you just take a picture and you capture a moment.
On the morning of August the 2nd, 1944, we liberated Dol de Bretagne. It's the only picture that shows Dol with American soldiers liberating it. The city is alive. It was dead when I walked through here. The Nazis were simply, they didn't know what happiness was. We kept walking. We came to Mount Dol, and out of nowhere, suddenly come all these people, mostly women and children. And we start giving them some chocolates mostly. And one woman, I guess she was tired of holding her baby, and just put it on the lap of the soldier, Private Lofgren. And I took this picture. When a mother puts her baby on the lap of a stranger, that means they trust you more than anything else. You know, I am sure those women would never do that in the lap of a German. Lofgren, at some point during the Battle of the Bulge, he disappeared. He, in all probability, got killed. Voila.
You know, we tend to forget that this is a young people's war. These guys are 19, 20, and for all the horrible things they have to see, there are still these moments of where you can see the boy, you know, you can see the boy soldier.
By the end of the war, I had taken the portraits of practically the entire battalion. To me, every soldier was a hero. You have no idea the feeling that you get when you are alone in the open. You feel this kind of bullets going through you. It's a strange feeling. You shiver and you sweat for fear that your moment could be at any time.
Being immersed in battle allowed Tony to capture images like the last step of Jack Rose, taken at the very moment of his death. This may be one of the only photos of its kind.
I've seen well over 1 million war pictures. Looking at the moment of death is incredibly rare, like in the 1s and 2s. And there are executions, but live battle moment of death is an incredibly rare picture.
There is one other image. It's Robert Capa's photograph from the Spanish Civil War, but there's a lot of controversy over the image. It's not at all clear that that actually happened, that it's a truthful image.
There are people who say that it is a staged photograph. Capa was always adamant that it wasn't staged. We will continue to use it until it's absolutely proved to be not true. A controversy also exists about the other most famous photograph, which is the Fenton, and whether he took the picture with the cannonballs on the road first, and then the cannonballs were taken off and put in the gutter, or they were in the gutter and he put them on the road. It's the difference between truth and fact. In Fenton's case, the moment when there were hundreds of cannonballs in one place, which meant the ferocity of the barrage. And in Capa's case, when a man is mortally wounded.
There was a difference in ethics. Before World War II, it wasn't necessarily thought to be a bad thing to stage a photograph. As far back as war photography goes, there was staging. Matthew Brady's Civil War photos were all staged. In World War I, many of the photos were staged, mostly because the technology and the size of the cameras made it difficult to take photographs without setting them up.
Dave Sherman was a fantastic life photographer, a good buddy of Capa. He was very honest about what he did in World War II. He's been quoted as saying that, you know, a lot of the shots, it was fabricated. You know, we created the shot for the picture editor to put on page 3 or the front cover. So some people were doing things 3 or 4 times for us. You know, it wasn't spontaneous, not like Tony, where he just picked up his camera and, you know, he was in a foxhole, click.
Ironically, Tony found himself the subject of a staged press photo, which would go on to become one of the most widely used images of American troops in the Normandy campaign.
There is a tradition that when you want soldiers running, never let them run towards the front, always towards the rear. And so I was running towards the rear. And I am down there. You can see that it's me. I felt ridiculous to be a subject rather than the photographer.
As a New York Times photographer, I cannot set up photographs. I can't even move a glass from a table. It has to be exactly the way it was. And that's under any circumstance whatsoever, even if it makes a better image. It's in some ways harder, but it's a truer image.
As a journalist and as a photographer, my responsibility is to cover and document what is happening around me, try not to get involved, try not to alter the situation at all with my presence, and to send as accurate of an image as I can back to my editors in New York or wherever they are.
I think the possibilities for digital manipulation are such these days that you have to be doubly careful and ask more questions perhaps than ever before, and really ascertain as much as you can about the veracity of the picture and of the person who took the photograph, in order to be sure that what you have is real and true.
It was an accident that I clicked at the same time that he got killed. Jack Rose was a simple southern boy. He was a super person. I went to meet his brother many years later. He was very grateful for that picture. When I went there, he had it framed on the wall. I thought that to them it would be something sacred.
I've had, widows of soldiers who were killed asking for the photograph of their, their late husband being zipped into a body bag. They want every single tangible thing that they can get attached to that person.
In early December, Tony's company entered the Hurtgen Forest during one of the coldest winters on record. German defenders had mined and booby-trapped the forest and covered all avenues of approach with snipers, automatic weapons, and artillery.
They called the Hurtgen Forest the meat factory because basically it was like feeding American bodies into a meat grinder. And the way they died was terrible. Most of them were killed by artillery fire, either shredded instantly if you were lucky, or you suffered terrible multiple injuries and grievous wounds.
By the time the fighting ended, the U.S. Army had lost over 30,000 men.
We arrived here December 6, 1944, and we left 19 days later. It was hell.
And yet, every day, Tony continued taking photos, by this point, numbering in the thousands. Many of his negatives were still carried in his backpack, somehow kept safe from harm.
Because of the roots, you really cannot dig deep. So I was in a foxhole perhaps 2 feet deep. Also, I had the logs on top. And I lay down in it, and I had my M1 on my chest, and a shrapnel came in, and it went right through the logs. For some reason, I don't know how it didn't hit. I was with my hands here, and right here, broke the M1 in two. And lucky that the shrapnel ended there. these trees. They were topless because shells would come here and they would hit a tree and they would explode, you see.
So the safest thing to do was actually hug the tree because you were closest to the source of the shell fire. It would spread away from you rather than going straight down. So that was completely counter-instinctual. You know, there's hell exploding all around you, and you're supposed to stand up and go over to the tree and hug it.
Shells wobbled, you know, when they came over, and they knew exactly how to do it. The shell one would land here, one here, one here, one here. So for 300-400 yards, all around rained shrapnels. Just imagine snowflakes coming towards you at 400 miles a second. You cannot run anywhere. There's no protection anywhere. There's no hope anywhere. You don't know where a big shell is going to hit next. Even a slightest small fragment would go right through and kill soldiers. It was early morning, something like 6 o'clock. We caught the Germans. They had no idea that we would be out at that hour of the morning, because in winter 6 o'clock is pretty dark. The smoke, in a way, in that picture helps to light the forest. And one of the reasons I took that picture is because one of the Nazis, if you look closely, has Hitler's mustache. Then I took a close-up of him, and that's how that picture came about. I did the utmost to survive. I ran fast, I dug deeper, I tried to be in a position where I had most protection. And you know, something else, I was an orphan, and sometimes I thought my mother and father were looking after me. I really thought that. How beautiful birds. Well, who would have known I would be back in Hurtgen Forest today?
Well, Tony wanted to show all aspects. He wanted to let people know how horrible war was, but he also wanted to let people see what the real life of a soldier was and of the people the soldiers encountered. So there were joyous moments. And if you look at the photos taken after areas were liberated, you see the full range of human condition. And you see this joy of the soldier kissing the little child, of people dancing throughout. And you have a real on-the-ground, pure view of what life was like.
The Kiss of Liberation is still one of the most celebrated photos of World War II.
I would like to speak French.
Monsieur Vaccaro souhaiterait s'exprimer en français.
I ran across the piazza to take that picture.
Pour prendre cette photo.
It was click, comme ça, click.
Très rapide.
Fini. The reason that picture exists is because it's a tradition in Saint-Briac to kiss 3 times, you see. So if they kissed only twice, I would have missed the picture. And to have told Jean to kiss her again, I don't know, it was not my style. Voilà, comme ça. There you are, la danse du tapis. We went around and round while a polka was playing in August 14, 1944. Oh, this is good. This is good. My girls. My girls.
The serious journalists and the serious photographers like Tony Vaccaro that I have had the privilege to meet and interview, it's not about voyeurism, it is about tribute. It is about a kind of admiration for the people who, put in this situation, gave that thing which is the ultimate gift, which is their life.
If I was not put on guard of the headquarters, I would have been killed. It was the 11th of January, 1945. We were in Belgium to fight the Battle of the Bulge, just between Autrey and Petit Langlier. It was freezing cold. We hadn't bathed, washed, changed socks, had hot meals for at least 10 days. I still have the habit of putting things in my pocket since the war, because you never know when you're going to see another piece of food again. We were ordered to take this field and go into the woods. I said goodbye to Sergeant Schumacher and Company F, and I went to a house here where we had the battalion headquarters to guard the CP all night. I seldom pulled guard duty. It was rare for me. And the reason is they always wanted tall, big boys for guards. So they never used me. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard these footsteps in the snow. So I said, "Halt, who's there?" And he said, "Schumacher." I knew something was wrong. All alone, a sergeant doesn't leave his platoon. I said, "What happened?" And he said that the whole platoon has been killed. I asked him if he could take me on the spot where it took place. So about 6:30 in the morning, we came up this road to this spot, and I see bodies all over here. And he tells me they were advancing, and when they arrived there, they were mowed down with a machine gun by the Germans. And there was one Tiger tank that knocked out 5 of our tanks. And one soldier, Sergeant Fair, who was wounded and screaming for help, and he couldn't move, was run over by our own Sherman tank. Schumacher tells me at a certain point between 1:30 and 2, out of the forest came this German dressed in white, and he had a pistol, and he went to every GI thinking that they were wounded. He kicked the helmet out of the way and put a bullet into each head. And roughly, that's 27 GIs. And then I saw this soldier that was lying down so peacefully, so beautiful. as if an artist had drawn it. It was, and I said to myself, Tony, you're looking for a requiem photograph. This is it. I placed the body exactly in the center. In other words, I had almost drawn lines in my rangefinder how things should be placed. I really worked with him and clicked when I was happy. Death that is beautiful. It's a contradiction here. You want the ugliest aspect of mankind, death, to be beautiful. Otherwise, it cannot be a monument.
So this is a conflict that photographers have to struggle with. I don't think it's right to put war photographs on a gallery wall and sell it as art. At the same time, though, if a photographer is not making photographs that are powerful, that are visually well executed, then they don't communicate what they wanted to communicate. So it is a contradiction.
The primary objective in journalism is truth. Truth comes before beauty. But oddly enough, the great photographers, the great war photographers, like other great photographers, tend to make truthful pictures which are also beautiful. And so there can be beauty in tragedy.
If I can find beauty in a situation, if I can find beautiful light or a subject that's captivating, something unexpected, if I can find something that will bring the reader in, I will shoot that. And I do try to make beautiful images in war zones because I think that it's the only way to get someone to ask questions. What's happening here and why am I captivated by this image? So I do think it's important.
When you become an artist, you have to push your feelings aside in order to maximize the feelings that you want to portray. You have to be cold-blooded. You have to be a son of a bitch. Here is, this thing is beautiful, and look at it, it's dead. I wanted this photograph to be that of an unknown soldier, but my curiosity had the better part of me, and I made a mistake. I took my bayonet, I chipped away. Again, I saw who it was. My friend, Henry J. Tannenbaum. We were both from New York. We became friends, and one day he did show me his family, a wife and a baby.
The bullet that killed my father also destroyed my mother. My mother told me that my father was alive and was working for the FBI. She would talk to a radio that was in the kitchen. The radio didn't have to be on. She would talk to this radio and she would hear my father talking to her about his FBI assignments. I was at age 9 pretty much taking care of my mother, who was a recluse. I coped. I had to do what I had to do. If I had to forge a check, I forged a check. If I couldn't go home until 11, 12 o'clock at night because she was screaming too loudly, I walked the streets of New York. She went to her deathbed believing my father was still alive. I knew nothing about my father. When I say nothing, I mean that I had a telegram that said my father, Henry R. Tannenbaum, died in Belgium on January 11, 1945. The first time I saw the picture of my father dead in the snow. I needed to spend a lot of time looking at it. I had no idea who that person was. He became more real to me. He's dead. It's about as real as life can be, his death. So I called Tony and I said, "Hi, my name is Sam Tannenbaum." And he said, "What'd you say your name was?" I said, "Tannenbaum."
And I start crying. He said, "Are you Tony Vaccaro who took that picture in the snow of my dead father?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I saw that picture in your exhibition in Luxembourg." And you know, I come here on the 11th of January.
Really?
Yes. And then the whole thing changed. It no longer was something between me and this unknown soldier, but now it became me and this known soldier who had relatives, who had friends, and people know about him. By revealing his name, we will be together forever. By the way, I didn't tell you, but I put this here. And I picked it up at a beach, Omaha Beach in Normandy. And I really think that this was done by a bullet.
I love that.
This was done by a bullet. And it's like a face. Yeah.
Tony gave me my father.
Yeah.
Tony made a person out of a myth. My father was a myth because my mother said he was alive and I knew he was dead. So Tony actually produced somebody who had a history, had a life, and spurred me on to find out more about him.
When I asked the owner of this land, "Why did you transform a wheat field to a forest?" he says, "No, this is not a forest. These are Christmas trees that I sell them in Portugal and Spain." And then I asked him if he knew what Tannenbaum meant. And he said, "No, je ne sais pas." I said, "This means Christmas tree in German language." And we all remained silent when we realized that where Tannenbaum was killed, now they are growing Christmas trees.
So many of what we do now are slideshows, like with the web, and you have 10, 12 pictures in a row. And that's great, but at the same time, it's also a bit of a curse, because what you're really looking for is that one image that represents all of that. If you take Eddie Adams, for example, there's one very famous photograph that he came out of an entire war with. That photo encapsulates so many conflicts about the horrors of war and death. When I think about pictures from World War II or any other conflict, it's not the moving pictures that are seared in my memory, it's those single images. It taps into a completely different part of the brain that retains memory in a completely different way. It's an emotional experience where, we're not picking out a frame grab from video, but it's that individual photographer's choice of pushing the shutter at a moment because that moment is special.
Images talk to us like words talk to us. Certain images touch us. They tell you something that could lead us to survive or extinction. I bought a Jeep for $300. It was brand new. It had gone 3,000 miles. Unfortunately, I wrecked it.
Oh.
I forgot to put oil in the motor and I burned the motor.
Oh, that's unforgivable. Unforgivable.
Yes, it's unforgivable. Oh my God. Oh, well, what do you know? I had to come here to see one of these again. Wow. This is one of the reasons we won the war.
Absolutely. Do you fancy a ride in it?
Chevaux de course. Oh, what do you know?
Racehorses from the chateau up there.
Oh, really?
They breed the racehorses. And the Germans occupied that chateau.
Oh, really?
Well, they always
They
chose...
took the best. They chose the best building.
And they knew the countryside better than you did. They were living here. They had the advantage every which way, didn't they?
Yes, yes. One morning we were going from place to place in the field that had just been tilled, you know, clean, nice. And we were walking through this field, and the way we walked, usually the second person would walk in the step of the leader, you see. And then all of a sudden, as I looked on the ground, I saw this thin, shiny copper wire, and his foot was already under the wire. If he had taken the step...
The whole platoon would have gone up.
The whole platoon would have gone up. So I reached for his leg. I didn't have time to talk. I reached for his leg, and he was bigger than I was. So I held his foot down, and I told him, don't move, don't move. The mine wire is on your foot. And he looks down and he sees it. And we tiptoed out of that field immediately. Then the anti-mine people came and they removed him.
Cheers. Good health.
Good health to you too. What a wonderful wine. Oh God, yes.
Should we look at some of your photos here?
It took a long time for me to learn the trade. It's a trade. To be a combat photographer, it's a trade.
What sort of speed was that?
I am shooting here a 1/25th of a second.
So you got some nice movements.
So, and I was panning, as you can see.
Yep.
I focused on him while I was moving.
That's
what.
A lovely effect.
Yes.
And these marks here are drying marks, are they?
No, these marks happened in 1947. There was a flood in a dark room of Stars and Stripes.
Right, okay.
And my trunk, with all my negatives,
contaminated by the water.
By the water, they got wet completely.
I think somehow that water contamination.
It adds drama.
It does.
It's a war picture that went through the war.
Yeah.
You see.
I think it's dramatic. Amazing picture.
Thank you.
You were almost in a unique situation where you had a gun in one hand and a camera in the other.
And which to use first.
Exactly, which combat photographers didn't do, did they?
I was told, Tony, we give you permission to take any pictures you want to do, but first you are a soldier. You worry about your survival, and then you take your pictures. Don't ever take pictures while an enemy is shooting at you. So that was a rule I followed. First comes war, then comes art.
There are many things that you come across in war situations that are moments of humanity, or moments of the aftermath of something terrible, grief, destruction, that if it's photographed in a compelling enough way, can connect with the viewer and allow them to think, oh my God, if that were me, or if that were my family, or if that were my house, this is awful.
On the 28th of February 1945, our mission was to take Huertgen Bush in Germany. And as we were advancing towards this highway, we heard a tank coming to defend the town. We fired a bazooka and we knocked out the tank because smoke began to come out of it. And we see the hatchet opened up and this guy came out. It seems to me that he was filled with diesel, and as he opened up, he burst into flames, but he managed to jump out. Unfortunately, that didn't help him, because once he landed, the flames continued, and as my companions passed the tank, I looked back and I see this German pilot burning. This tank was right here. I put my rifle aside and I clicked that one picture. And as he was saying his last words, Mutter, 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 he died And what was left of him, I wanted to record it beautifully. As I was facing him, I actually thought of the picture of Tannenbaum, but it was not Tannenbaum that I was remember. It was the composition in this square. I wanted to state this: war is ugly when it is cold, freezing, and war is ugly when it is hot and burning.
For me, the camera is completely a shield. Having the camera in front of my face keeps me focused on the image and on the frame and trying to almost look at a situation surgically, almost as if I can stay one step removed. I know that I have to document this. Sometimes when it's so overwhelming, I try to just focus on that frame.
I find that there's a certain separation at the moment when you're taking the picture, when you have the camera up to your eye. There's a lot going on in my mind at that time outside of what I'm seeing. I'm thinking, is there another rocket coming in now?
As I stood up high to take a picture, the German soldiers shot at me with a machine gun, and I could hear bullets hitting the tank. And I dove down and I landed almost near on top of him. And as I looked up at him, I read the words on a buckle, Gott mit uns. Obviously, at that point, God was on my side. Him saying his last words, Mutter, Mutter. That touched me because I loved my mother, and this enemy loved the same thing. I smelled his flesh. It was ugly. It was distasteful. I almost tasted it. I inhaled that. The combat soldier has something in his memory that will drive him insane for the rest of his life. I'm not the same man. I'm not the boy of 17, 18. I'm a different man now.
And the great untold story about the greatest generation, so-called, that came back is that they didn't bitch and moan. They sucked it up and they came back and they created the America we see today, the middle class, etc., and that they weren't somehow permanently damaged by their experiences. Of course they were. It's just that when they came back, they didn't talk about it.
By April 1945, Tony had been in combat for close to 10 months. Heading into the final days of the war, Tony and his regiment arrived at the Elbe River, the last natural barrier between the 83rd Division and Berlin.
The boats arrived in a truck and they were carried in the river. And the soldiers got in, G Company, 331st, and we began to cross. As I was crossing in the middle of this huge river, suddenly I heard a sound that I had never heard before. It was a little foggy, mist was rising, and suddenly out of nowhere comes this plane. And that was the first sound of jet I had ever heard. And the son of a gun was coming straight from my boat. And I'm holding the camera, and I didn't click because I said, Tony, this is your end. I thought he was going to strafe my boat, and I had no chance of survival, and I began to think, what should I do? He came down, and he left and disappeared in fog again. By the time we arrived across, a little on the left, fire was coming from those trees. by German soldier here, left and right. Dankeschön. Dankeschön. Auf Wiedersehen. We made contact with the German soldiers. We killed them and we captured prisoners. And we moved forward for the next 40 miles.
Late on the night of May 7th, Tony went on what would be his last patrol, driving to within 30 miles of Berlin.
We darkened our face with black grease, and we left with a jeep, 4 of us, and drove from Hohenlippe for another 20 miles. We didn't see anything. We came back around 4:30 in the morning. About 10 o'clock on the 8th, they woke us up, they woke me up, and they said the war is over. And believe me, that was the most beautiful day of my life. The war is over. Oh, it was unbelievable. I felt as if I had won. You know, indeed we had won the war. We were ecstatic, a great feeling. I really wanted to go into a forest near Hohenlippe to hear birds singing. And as I left the border of the town in a gutter, I came across with the ugliest picture of the war. It was a picture of a lady well-dressed, great cloth. Obviously, she was very wealthy. Her legs were spread apart. Her dress was pulled over her knees, and a bayonet was stuck in her vagina. A soldier nearby told me that she had been raped by 3 soldiers. I couldn't fathom that mankind could be so brutal. I couldn't take the picture. I went over, I removed this knife and threw it away, and I take a blanket that was there, covered her, and I felt disgusted. I didn't want to go into the woods and listen to the birds anymore. I just wanted to go back and find a way to forget the scene.
I probably would have taken it. I'm not sure I would send it, but I probably would take it for documentary purposes. Or it depends. I mean, I think in that situation, because it was a war image and she had been raped, it's important to take the whole scene as almost evidence. You know, this is what has happened, and it is such a tragic thing.
We need to understand that that is part of war, and we need to acknowledge it and own it. Those pictures are rarely published, even when they exist. Vaccaro was conflicted, as many photographers who have watched rapes in conflict situations have told me they are conflicted.
As I moved away, my brain said, Tony, what kind of witness to this war are you? You go back there, remove the blanket, find a knife, put it back, and take this picture. So I went back. I removed the blanket. I didn't even look where the knife was. I just couldn't, I didn't have the guts to take a knife and put it back in her vagina. So I only went back and I took a picture. She was wearing a Nazi helmet and a Nazi coat, and she began to use Panzerfaust against our GIs as we were advancing. They were angry because we had few soldiers wounded in Hohenlippe on the last day of the war. But I regretted that I took that picture, and I went back and tried to forget everything.
I am glad Vaccaro overrode his reservations about photographing her and photographed her because it's an important document.
If we're taking pictures of men who have been killed in gruesome ways, why wouldn't we take that same picture of a woman?
Ultimately, he didn't really have much choice, actually. It was what he had to do and what he was doing all along.
But I think that's the truest image of all his images. I think it's a picture of violation. Now, he was violated by the fact that he had to experience that and see it, that he has to carry that around with him for the rest of his life. But it's also a picture of the violation that's done to that woman, that she did to others, the cycle of violence that became so insane and just unstoppable. The bottom line is that everyone's brutalized by war in some ways. It's the fact that Tony was able to transcend that and create art is a wonderful thing that is a testament to the endurance of humanity and within him, the artist.
It makes you a beast. When the war was over, I was another person. I was no longer the wonderful boy that grew up in Italy and in New Rochelle. I was unhappy for a very long time. I couldn't become a civilian. You see, you don't realize you are in the grip of these nightmares. You know, the faces of the people you killed or wounded or whatever. All your friends that were killed, you dream about them night after night. They just don't leave you alone. I decided that the only way to forget the war was to be in constant movement. Photography helped tremendously because I decided to stay. I went to work for the Stars and Stripes. At first, I bought myself a Jeep for $300, and I went with this Jeep everywhere in Europe.
By the time Tony returned to the United States in July of 1949, he was still coping with what would be labeled today as post-traumatic stress disorder. But he would find solace in a surprising way.
I wanted to work for Flair, the greatest magazine I have ever seen. So I went to see Fleur Coles, who was the brilliant editor, and she said, "I don't want a combat photographer. Can you do fashion?" Well, I had never done fashion before, but I said, of course I can do fashion. So I am now a fashion photographer. It took a lot of balls, yes, because I was lying. I needed a job. Working with women, the compassion that they had for me, that is what saved me, because I was suffering. How can I kiss a woman? How can I hold a woman, the most beautiful thing in the world, with what I have done?
You know, you don't want your wife to see you as a killer. You don't want your wife or the people you love to see you as a monster.
Though Tony has taken thousands and thousands of photos over the course of his life, soon after the war ended, he decided never to take another image of war or conflict. A vow he keeps to this day.
I didn't want a thing to do with killing and death. I had enough. I was sleeping and dreaming of flying in the air naked singing. It was an incredible dream. But when I woke up, the singing was still going on in front of my window. So I opened the window and I see these children and they're singing. And I quickly took this picture. And the words came to me, paradise could be on the earth. Just that. The earth is our real paradise. There is no other paradise.